Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. The thing about dying alone on an uncharted moon, Bennett thought, as his cargo hauler screamed through atmosphere like a wounded animal, was that nobody would even know where to start looking. Well, technically, QU-88 wasn't uncharted. It had a designation, which meant some poor surveyor had flown past it once, shrugged, and moved on with their life. Smart person, that surveyor. The meteor shower had come out of nowhere, which was impossible because space didn't work that way, except apparently it did when you were 3 weeks into a solo medical supply run and thinking about whether freeze-dried lasagna actually qualified as Italian food. One moment, smooth sailing through the Outer Veil sector. The next, his shields were lighting up like a festival display, alarms shrieking in 6 different tones, and the AI, God's bless her glitchy little heart, was calmly informing him that catastrophic hull failure was imminent. "Thanks, sweetheart," Bennett muttered, wrestling with controls that had decided now was a great time to stop cooperating. "Real helpful. Any other obvious observations? Water wet? Space cold?" The AI didn't respond. She'd stopped responding 2 days ago, right after he'd asked her to calculate the most efficient route, and she'd somehow tried to navigate through a star. He'd been talking to himself ever since, which honestly wasn't that different from talking to her. The moon rushed up to meet him, purple, because of course it was purple. Nothing in this sector believed in normal colors, and Bennett did what every freight pilot learns in their first week. He aimed for the softest-looking terrain and prayed to whatever deity handled crash landings. The impact rattled his teeth, threw him against the harness hard enough to bruise, and filled the cabin with the delightful sounds of expensive equipment becoming expensive debris. The hauler skidded, plowed through what might have been trees or possibly giant mushrooms, honestly hard to tell when you're spinning, and finally, mercifully, stopped. Bennett sat in the sudden silence, breathing hard, doing a mental inventory. Ribs, sore but intact. Head, aching but no blood. Dignity, utterly destroyed. But that had happened back when he'd named his ship's AI Sweetie, out of spite after the divorce. "Well," he said to the dead console, "could have been worse." The front viewport, cracked but still functional, showed him his new home. The forest, if that's what you called this tangle of bioluminescent vegetation, glowed with a soft purple luminescence that would have been beautiful if it wasn't so deeply unsettling. 2 moons hung in a sky that was just a shade too green, and the silence pressed against his ears like water pressure. He'd crashed on alien worlds before. Came with the job. But something about this place made his hindbrain, that ancient bit of human wetware that still remembered being prey, sit up and pay attention. First things first. Inventory. The cargo hold, miraculously, was mostly intact. Medical supplies for a colony in the vast. Antibiotics, surgical equipment, the kind of stuff that kept people alive in places where nearest hospital meant a 3-month journey. All useless to him now, unless he developed appendicitis, which would really just be the cherry on top of this whole situation. His personal supplies, 3 nutrient bars that tasted like sweetened cardboard, 2 packets of dehydrated stew that required water he'd have to find, and a half-empty container of coffee grounds. The coffee hurt most. He was down to rationing, and rationing coffee was when you knew things had gotten serious. The comms array, destroyed. Naturally. The emergency beacon, intact, but the signal couldn't punch through the moon's atmosphere. Too many heavy minerals in the ionosphere, or possibly the moon just hated him personally. Hard to say. His options were simple. Stay with the ship and hope someone noticed he was missing, or, well, that was really the only option. Wandering off into a glowing alien forest ranked somewhere between terrible idea and how most horror stories start. As the local sons, plural, he could see two of them setting in different directions because this place loved being difficult, dipped below the horizon, Bennett set about making the crash site livable. He pulled cargo containers into a rough semicircle, creating a sheltered area. Found a thermal beacon in the emergency kit and set it up, casting a warm orange glow that pushed back the purple twilight. Then he sat down, back against cold metal, and allowed himself exactly 30 seconds of despair. That was the rule. 30 seconds to feel sorry for yourself. Then you got back to work. He pulled out a nutrient bar, unwrapped it with the enthusiasm of a man facing execution, and took a bite. Cardboard. Definitely cardboard, with notes of sadness and a hint of artificial vanilla. That's when he noticed the eyes. They caught the beacon's light first, reflecting amber gold from the tree line. Low to the ground, unblinking, watching. Bennett froze mid-chew, his hand slowly moving toward the plasma cutter on his belt. The tool wasn't a weapon. Well, not officially. But it could cut through hull plating, so it could probably handle whatever was attached to those eyes. The creature stepped into the light, and Bennett's brain tried very hard to categorize what it was seeing. Big as a large dog, maybe bigger. 6 limbs, 4 for walking, 2 smaller ones tucked against its chest like a mantis. Sleek fur the color of deep space, that blue-black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The head was broad, almost feline, with those oversized eyes dominating its face. And the claws, oh, the claws were very visible, retractable, but currently extended, each one looking sharp enough to open him up like a ration packet. Predator. Every line of the creature screamed apex hunter from the way it moved. Fluid, controlled, powerful. To the way it held itself, like violence, waiting for an excuse. It sat down at the very edge of the beacon's light. Just sat there, tail curled around its legs, staring at him. More specifically, staring at his nutrient bar. Bennett looked at the bar, looked at the creature, back to the bar. "You've got to be kidding me," he said aloud. The creature made a sound, not quite a chirp, not quite a growl, somewhere in between. A sort of questioning chitter that vibrated in a frequency that bypassed his ears and went straight to some instinctive understanding. It was begging. This apex predator, built like death's favorite pet, was begging for food. "This is stupid," Bennett informed the universe at large. "This is how people die in stories. Oh, look at the cute alien death machine. Let me give it a snack." Cut to grieving family, closed casket funeral. The creature tilted its head, those enormous eyes catching the light, and made that sound again. Softer this time. Bennett's grandmother had owned a cat, not a pet cat, but a barn cat, half-feral thing that killed rats the size of small dogs and had exactly zero interest in human affection. Except when it was hungry. Then it would sit outside the kitchen door and make a sound not unlike this creature's chitter, a noise that somehow conveyed both, "I could kill you," and, "but I'd rather you feed me," in equal measure. His logical brain was screaming. This was a terrible idea. Monumentally stupid. The kind of decision that got you eaten. But hunger was universal, wasn't it? And he recognized that look. That desperate, pride-swallowing look of something that needed help but didn't know how to ask. "You're going to eat me," Bennett said, breaking the nutrient bar in half. "Not now, maybe, but eventually. This is going to end badly." He tossed half the bar toward the creature. What happened next happened fast. The creature snatched it out of the air with reflexes that made Bennett's blood run cold, devoured it in 2 bites, and then didn't leave. It could have, should have, taken the food and vanished back into the forest. That's what wild things did. Instead, it moved closer, still cautious, and settled down just outside his makeshift shelter. Not close enough to touch, close enough to matter. And then it turned, positioning itself between Bennett and the dark forest, and started watching the tree line with those unsettling amber eyes. Bennett finished his half of the nutrient bar slowly, trying to process what had just happened. He'd just bought himself a bodyguard. A possibly homicidal, definitely carnivorous bodyguard. But still. "This is insane," he muttered, pulling out his emergency blanket and wrapping it around his shoulders. The temperature was dropping fast, the kind of cold that seeped into bones. Completely insane. Tomorrow I'm going to wake up missing limbs. The creature didn't respond, just kept its vigil, a living shadow between him and whatever else this moon held. Despite everything, the crash, the isolation, the very real possibility that he'd just made the worst decision of his life, Bennett felt himself relaxing. The presence, as threatening as it should have been, was somehow comforting. Like having a guard dog with retractable murder knives for hands and eyes that suggested it knew 63 ways to kill him. He lay down, using a supply pack as a pillow, and stared up at the twin moons. The stars here were different, constellations he didn't recognize. He was so far from anything familiar that the distance made his chest ache. "If you're going to eat me," he said quietly, "at least wait until I'm asleep. I'd rather not see it coming." The creature's ear, he was pretty sure that triangular appendage was an ear, twitched in his direction, but it didn't turn around. Bennett closed his eyes, sure he wouldn't sleep, and was unconscious within minutes. He didn't see the creature settle more comfortably into its guard position. Didn't see the way it tested the air, cataloging scents and potential threats. Didn't see the moment, sometime in the deepest part of the night, when something large moved in the forest, and the creature went absolutely still, every muscle coiled, until whatever it was decided to find easier prey elsewhere. When Bennett woke, stiff and cold and alive, the creature was still there, still watching, still waiting. And that's when he knew his life had just gotten significantly more complicated. Morning on QU-88 arrived with all the subtlety of a symphony performed by enthusiastic amateurs. The local wildlife, whatever it was, had opinions about dawn, and those opinions were loud, discordant, and somehow both musical and deeply annoying. Bennett sat up, every muscle in his body filing formal complaints, and found himself staring directly into amber eyes approximately 2 feet from his face. "Gods!" He jerked back, heart attempting escape velocity, before his brain caught up. "Right. You, still here, not eaten. That's good?" The creature blinked slowly, the kind of blink that suggested it found his panic amusing, and moved away to continue whatever patrol route it had established during the night. That's when Bennett noticed the tree line, specifically the claw marks. Deep gouges in bark that glowed faintly purple at chest height, his chest height, scoring the trees in sets of 3. And the blood. Not red, thank the gods, but a luminescent blue-green that splattered the undergrowth and painted the rocks in abstract patterns that screamed, "Violence happened here." He stood slowly, moving to examine the marks. The scratches were fresh, still weeping sap. Whatever had made them was big. and based on the spray pattern of that glowing blood, the creature, his creature, and when had he started thinking of it that way, had won the argument? "So, you weren't just sitting pretty," Bennett said, looking at the creature with new appreciation. "Something came visiting, and you sent it home with a story." The creature was pacing the perimeter now, limping slightly. Its shoulder on the left side showed matted fur and what might have been dried blood beneath. Bennett's grandmother's voice echoed in his memory, practical and no nonsense. "A working animal earns its keep, but you earn its loyalty by taking care of it proper." "Come here," he said, keeping his voice level, non-threatening. "Let me see that shoulder." The creature stopped pacing, regarded him with those unsettling eyes, and didn't move. "Yeah, I know. I'm not exactly qualified for alien veterinary work," Bennett continued, pulling out his emergency medical kit. "But I've got antiseptic that works on carbon-based life, which you appear to be, and bandages that stick to anything. So we can either do this the easy way, or you can keep pretending you're fine while that gets infected and kills you. Your choice." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with what could only be described as resignation, the creature limped over and sat down in front of him. Up close, the damage was worse than he'd thought. 3 parallel gashes cut through fur and into muscle, deep enough to be serious, but not life-threatening. Whatever had attacked was strong. Whatever had driven it off was stronger. "This is going to hurt," Bennett warned, uncapping the antiseptic. "And if you decide to take my hand off, I'm going to be very disappointed in both of us." He dabbed the solution onto the wounds, and the creature went rigid, a low sound building in its chest that made Bennett's hindbrain scream warnings. But it didn't strike, didn't even pull away, just maintained eye contact, pupils dilating and contracting, while Bennett worked. "You need a name?" Bennett muttered, hands steady despite his nerves. "Can't keep calling you creature or hey you or please don't eat me. That's just awkward for everyone involved." The creature made a sound, not the chitter from last night, but something else, a sort of ascending whistle, musical and oddly cheerful despite the circumstances. "Whistle," Bennett said, testing it. "Yeah, okay. Your whistle now. Congratulations. You've been named after a noise. My grandmother had a cat named after the sound it made when it was hungry, so there's precedent." Whistle, and it was whistle now. The name stuck the moment he said it. Made that sound again, this time with what Bennett could have sworn was approval. The bandaging took longer. The adhesive patches from his kit were designed for human skin, but they stuck to fur well enough. By the time he finished, Whistle looked like they'd been in a bar fight and lost, but the wounds were clean and sealed. "There," Bennett sat back. "You'll live, probably. I'm not a doctor, and you're not exactly in the manual." Whistle's response was to rest their head, massive, heavy, and warm, directly on Bennett's leg. Just placed it there and sighed, a sound of pure contentment that seemed impossible from something built like a weapon, and Bennett felt something crack in his chest, something that had been closed off since the divorce, since he'd taken these solo runs specifically to avoid connection, to avoid the messy business of caring about anything. "You're a manipulative little monster," he told Whistle, but his hand was already moving to scratch behind one of those triangular ears. The fur was softer than it looked, almost silky. "This is a con. You're conning me. I know how this works." Whistle's eyes closed in what could only be described as bliss. They sat like that for longer than Bennett would admit, until the suns climbed higher, and his stomach reminded him that half a nutrient bar wasn't a sustainable diet. "Right," he said, gently moving Whistle's head. Food. Then I need to get to the beacon array, see if I can boost the signal. You coming? Whistle stood immediately, that earlier limp barely noticeable now, and positioned themselves at Bennett's side. Not behind, not in front. Beside. Like they'd been doing this their whole life. Bennett pulled out another nutrient bar, broke it in quarters, and handed one to Whistle. Breakfast of champions, or crash survivors. Same thing, really. Whistle took it delicately, almost carefully. And that's when Bennett noticed the teeth. Rows of them, serrated and sharp, designed for tearing meat, designed for killing. Whistle could have taken his whole hand off, could have taken his arm, could have killed him a dozen times over by now. Instead, they ate the quarter ration in polite bites and waited for Bennett to finish his portion. You're weird, Bennett informed them. I don't know what evolutionary path created you, but somebody messed up the terrifying predator programming. You're supposed to be scary, not— He gestured vaguely at Whistle's expectant expression. Whatever this is. The hike to the ship's emergency array was only half a kilometer, but the forest made it feel longer. Everything here grew in the wrong directions, twisted and spiraling like the local gravity had suggestions the plants took personally. The bioluminescence was stronger in the shade, creating pools of purple and blue light that moved when Bennett wasn't looking directly at them. Whistle led the way, moving with confidence through terrain that all looked identical to Bennett's eyes. They'd pause occasionally, testing the air, adjusting their course, and Bennett followed because the alternative was getting lost, and he'd had enough disasters for 1 week. You know where you're going? He asked, ducking under a branch that dripped something viscous and probably toxic. Because if this is the part where you lead me to your nest of hungry siblings, I'm going to be very upset. Whistle glanced back, made a sound that could have been a laugh, if predators laughed, which they probably didn't, and kept walking. The attack came from above. Bennett heard it first, a rush of air, wrong and too fast, and Whistle's reaction was instantaneous. They shoved Bennett sideways with enough force to send him sprawling, then launched upward with a snarl that sounded like ripping metal. Bennett hit the ground, rolled, came up with the plasma cutter in his hand, and got his first look at what passed for wildlife on this moon. Mantis. His brain supplied the word even though it was inadequate. Imagine a praying mantis. Scale it up to the size of a human, give it serrated limbs that could probably cut through bone, and paint it the color of infected wounds. 2 of them, dropping from the canopy with the kind of coordinated attack that spoke of intelligence and practice. Whistle met the first one mid-air, a collision of fur and chitin that sent both creatures crashing into the undergrowth. The second one oriented on Bennett, with compound eyes that reflected his terror in 1,000 facets. Oh, come on! Bennett activated the plasma cutter, the tool humming to life, throwing blue-white light. I already crashed. That was my disaster quota for the month. The mantis thing lunged, limbs scissoring for his throat. And Bennett did what any reasonable person would do when facing an alien death machine. He swung the plasma cutter like a club. The superheated edge caught the creature's limb mid-strike, shearing through chitin with a sound like breaking glass. The mantis screeched, a sound that would haunt Bennett's nightmares for months, and reared back. Behind it, Whistle was a blur of violence, all pretense of domesticity gone. They moved like liquid death, 6 limbs working in concert, claws finding gaps in armor, teeth finding soft tissue. The first mantis tried to retreat. Whistle didn't let it. The second mantis, reassessing its odds, made a choice. It feinted toward Bennett, then broke and ran. Whistle let it go, turning back to Bennett with blood, both blue and that luminescent green, dripping from their muzzle. They were breathing hard, favoring that injured shoulder again, but their eyes were clear and focused, on him, making sure he was okay. "I'm good," Bennett managed, hands shaking as he deactivated the cutter. "Thanks to you. Again. This is becoming a pattern." Whistle approached slowly, checking him over with the thoroughness of a field medic, nose working, eyes tracking every movement. When they were satisfied he was unhurt, they pressed their forehead against his chest, just for a moment. A gesture. Clearly a gesture. Relief, maybe? Or reassurance. Bennett's hand found that spot behind Whistle's ear again, scratching gently. "We're even now, I think. I feed you. You keep me from becoming lunch. Fair trade." Whistle pulled back, made that whistling sound, their namesake, and turned back toward their original path. But they stayed closer now, within arm's reach, their body language screaming protection. The beacon array, when they reached it, was a mess. Half melted from atmospheric entry, the other half crushed where the ship had plowed through the forest. Bennett spent an hour trying to salvage something, anything, from the wreckage while Whistle maintained a perimeter patrol. Nothing. The array was dead, the backup power cells cracked, the signal amplifier scattered across 300 meters of alien forest. "We're stuck," Bennett said finally, sitting down hard on a piece of hull plating. "Nobody's coming. Nobody even knows where to look." Whistle sat beside him, solid and warm, and leaned against his side. They made it back to the shelter as the suns were setting, Bennett's mind working through problems he couldn't solve, and Whistle limping more noticeably. The fight had cost them both. That night, Bennett split his dehydrated stew exactly in half, adding water from a stream Whistle had shown him, after testing it first by drinking themselves, which was either trust or a very elaborate poisoning scheme. They ate together in comfortable silence, the thermal beacon casting orange light against purple darkness. When Bennett pulled out his emergency blanket and laid down, Whistle didn't take up their guard position at the perimeter. Instead, they curled up at the entrance to the shelter, close enough that Bennett could reach out and touch them if he wanted. Which he did, his hand resting on warm fur, feeling the steady rhythm of breathing. "We'll figure this out," he told Whistle, though he wasn't sure if he was trying to convince them or himself. "Rescue will come eventually. They have to. And until then, we've got each other." Which is either the best or worst survival strategy ever? Hard to say. Whistle made a soft sound, somewhere between a purr and a sigh, and Bennett felt his eyes getting heavy. He dreamed that night, for the first time since the crash. Not of the accident, not of being stranded. He dreamed of his grandmother's farm, of barn cats and warm kitchens, of belonging somewhere. When he woke in the deepest part of the night, disoriented and cold, Whistle was there, not sleeping, watching the darkness with eyes that caught the beacon's dying light, keeping guard over the strange human who'd given them half a nutrient bar and somehow earned loyalty in return. Bennett watched them for a moment. This creature that shouldn't care, shouldn't stay, shouldn't be anything but a threat. "Thanks," he whispered. One ear twitched in acknowledgement, but Whistle didn't turn away from their vigil. Bennett closed his eyes and slept more soundly than he had in years. 5 days on QU-88, and Bennett had developed a routine. Wake up, share breakfast with a carnivorous alien, attempt to improve their survival situation, fail spectacularly, share dinner with said alien, sleep while being guarded by something that could kill him with minimal effort. It was almost domestic, if you ignored the constant mortal peril. The rations were critical now. down to one nutrient bar and half a packet of dehydrated something that claimed to be beef stew, but was definitely lying. Whistle had started bringing him kills, small creatures that looked like rabbits crossed with lizards, and while Bennett appreciated the gesture, he wasn't quite desperate enough to try alien sushi. Yet, he was attempting to rig a water filtration system from cargo netting and activated carbon when Whistle went rigid. Not the alert stance they took when scanning for threats. This was different. Every muscle locked, head tilted toward the sky, ears swiveling to track something Bennett couldn't hear. "What is it?" Bennett stood, hand moving automatically to the plasma cutter. "More mantis things? Because I'm really not in the mood for—" The sound hit him then, a low thrumming that felt wrong, mechanical, artificial. A ship. Hope exploded in his chest, bright and painful. Rescue. Finally. Someone had found him. The vessel descended through the canopy with the kind of precision that spoke of excellent piloting and better sensors. Sleek where Bennett's hauler was utilitarian, elegant where his was purely functional. The design was unfamiliar, elongated, almost organic, with sensor arrays that looked more like insect antennae than proper equipment. Not human, then. But that was fine. The galaxy was full of species, most of them helpful, all of them better than dying alone on a purple moon. The airlock opened with a hiss that sounded musical, and three figures emerged in environment suits that seemed to shimmer in the strange light. Bennett's first thought was, mantis. His second thought was, no, wait. Different mantis? These ones wore clothes. They moved with the careful deliberation of scientists, carrying scanning equipment, their movements oddly graceful despite the bulky suits. The lead figure approached, and Bennett could see compound eyes behind the helmet's faceplate, mandibles moving in a way that suggested communication. A voice emerged from a translator unit on the suit's chest, synthesized and precise. Human. Unexpected. You are injured? Crashed, Bennett said, trying not to stare. 5 days ago. Comms are down. Beacon's dead. I'm fine, mostly. But I could really use a lift off this rock. The lead scientist tilted her head. He was assuming gender based on absolutely nothing, in a gesture that might have been acknowledgement. I am Dr. Quallen, xenobiologist. We are researching this moon's ecosystem. Your presence is irregular. Yeah, well, meteor showers are irregular too, but here we are. Bennett gestured to his shelter. I've been surviving on rations and stubbornness. Can you? He stopped because Dr. Quallen wasn't looking at him anymore. She was staring past him, at Whistle, and even through the suit and the alien biology, Bennett could read the body language, recognition, and alarm. Step away from the Night Fang, Dr. Quallen said, her voice losing its clinical detachment. Slowly, no sudden movements. The what now? Bennett looked at Whistle, who had positioned themselves between him and the scientists, low and ready. You mean Whistle? They're harmless. Well, not harmless, but not harmful to me specifically. Night Fang, Dr. Quallen repeated, and now her companions were spreading out, flanking, hands moving to equipment that looked distinctly weapon-adjacent. Apex predator. Extremely dangerous. Solo hunters. They— She paused, compound eyes tracking Whistle's movements. They do not form bonds with anything, ever. Bennett laughed, the sound sharp and a little unhinged. Yeah, well, tell that to Whistle. They've been keeping me alive for 5 days, fought off threats, shared food, literally guarded me while I slept. So maybe your research needs updating. Impossible. Dr. Quallen moved closer, scanner extended. Night Fangs are abandoned at birth. Survival of the fittest. Cubs that live to maturity do so by learning to hunt, to kill. They sometimes imprint on prey species, but only to— She stopped, reading her scanner, mandibles moving rapidly. Only to practice hunting behavior before the kill. It is documented, extensively documented. The words hit Bennett like a physical blow. He looked at Whistle, who was still watching the scientists with clear distrust, then back to Dr. Quallen. "You're saying Whistle's been playing me? Planning to eat me this whole time?" "Not planning," Dr. Quallen corrected, with the kind of clinical precision that made it worse. "Instinct. The cub is nearly adolescent. Within days, possibly hours, its hunting drive will override any mimicry of bonding behavior. You have been, statistically speaking, already dead." Whistle made a low sound, that chitter from the first night, and pressed closer to Bennett's leg. "Does that look like a creature planning to kill me?" Bennett demanded, anger rising to cover the fear. "I've seen Whistle fight. Mantis things twice their size, and Whistle destroyed them. If they wanted me dead, I'd be dead." "Anthropomorphization," Dr. Quallen said, and Bennett was starting to hate how calm she sounded. "You are seeing patterns that do not exist. Emotional projection onto a species incapable of reciprocal bonding. The cub stays near you because you represent easy prey. The protective behavior is territorial guarding of a food source. The fact that you're basing this on adult specimens and have clearly never studied a cub's actual development?" Bennett interrupted. "Because I'm looking at a scientist who's real confident about research she's never actually done." That landed. Dr. Quallen's mandibles stopped moving for a moment. "We cannot study cubs. They die before we locate them. The survival rate is less than 8%. Adult night fangs are solitary, violent, and have killed more researchers than any other species on this moon." "Then maybe," Bennett said slowly, "you've been studying trauma survivors, not normal behavior. Maybe you've been looking at what happens when you force a social species to grow up alone and thinking that's just how they are." Silence. Even through the suit, Bennett could see Dr. Quallen processing this. Her companions exchanging what might have been glances. "Fascinating hypothesis," she said finally. "Completely unsupported by data, and irrelevant to your immediate survival. We can transport you to safety. The nightfang remains here. It is a protected species. Removal from habitat violates 6 different conservation laws." "No," Bennett said. "No? No. Whistle comes with me, or I stay here." The words came out firm, certain, and somewhere in his head a voice was screaming about what a stupid hill this was to die on. "We're a package deal." Dr. Quallen's entire posture shifted. "Human, you do not understand. Within our research vessel, confined spaces, stress, the cub will revert to instinct. It will kill you. Perhaps kill others? This is not negotiable." "Then make it negotiable." Bennett crossed his arms. "Because I'm not leaving without Whistle, and you can't legally force me, so we're at an impasse. I can legally sedate you for your own safety. You can try." Whistle chose that moment to vocalize, that rising whistle song, and moved to sit directly in front of Bennett, facing the scientists. A living shield, claiming him. Dr. Quallen stared at this tableau for a long moment. "This is unprecedented," she said quietly. "If you are correct, if bonding capability exists in this species, the implications are—" She paused. "Everything we know would need revision." "So revise it," Bennett said. "But do it with us together. Test your theory. Prove me wrong, if you can. But don't separate us based on assumptions." More silence. Then, a compromise. "You both come aboard. but the night fang stays in a containment area, monitored. If it shows aggression, if it attempts to harm anyone, we separate you permanently. One night. We observe. If your bond is genuine, her tone suggested she thought this impossible. The cub will not adapt to captivity. Night fangs do not wait, do not pine. They are efficient, clinical. If it truly cares for you, that will be observable. Bennett looked down at Whistle, who looked back with those amber eyes that had watched over him through 5 long nights. One night, he agreed. But I'm coming back. We clear? Abundantly, Dr. Quallen said, gesturing to her companions. This is either groundbreaking research or an elaborate way to prove you wrong. Either way, it will be educational. Bennett knelt down, meeting Whistle's gaze. Hey, I need you to trust me. These people want to study you, make sure you're safe. I'll be nearby. One night, okay? Then we figure out what's next together. Whistle made a sound. Not the whistle, not the chitter. Something new. Almost questioning. I'm coming back, Bennett promised, and meant it with everything he had. They loaded Whistle into a containment unit that looked comfortable enough. Padded floor, water dispenser, even some of that rabbit lizard meat as a peace offering. Whistle went without resistance, but their eyes never left Bennett until the transparent wall sealed between them. As the ship lifted, off, leaving the crash site behind, Bennett watched Whistle through the containment wall. Watched them settle down, facing the door, tail wrapped around their legs. Waiting. One night, he repeated, to himself this time. Dr. Quallen's mandibles moved in what might have been sympathy. I hope you are right, human. For both your sakes. The Quellen research vessel was everything Bennett's hauler wasn't. Clean, efficient, and not held together with spare parts and prayers. They gave him actual food, protein that didn't taste like cardboard, and treated the cuts and bruises he'd been ignoring for 5 days. A proper medical scan showed nothing serious. Malnutrition, dehydration, some impressive bruising, and a stubborn refusal to acknowledge when he was in over his head. The psychological evaluation suggests trauma bonding, the medical technician said, mandibles clicking in what might have been concern. Common in isolation scenarios. You projected companionship onto the nearest viable. I'm going to stop you right there, Bennett interrupted, accepting a cup of something hot that smelled vaguely like tea. Because I've been married. I know what projecting looks like. This isn't that. But alone in the crew quarters they'd assigned him, watching the monitor feed of Whistle's containment area, doubt crept in. What if they were right? What if he'd invented a connection that didn't exist, seen friendship in instinct, read love into hunger? Whistle hadn't touched the food they'd provided, hadn't explored the containment area, just sat facing the door, exactly as Bennett had last seen them. Hour 1. Whistle sat. Hour 2. Whistle sat. Hour 3. Whistle sat. Bennett tried to sleep and couldn't. Tried to eat and managed 3 bites. Tried to convince himself that Dr. Quallen knew what she was talking about. That decades of research couldn't be wrong. Failed at all 3. At hour 8, he gave up and went to the observation deck where Dr. Quallen was reviewing data, her compound eyes reflecting the glow of multiple screens. This isn't normal, she said without preamble. Night fangs are opportunistic, efficient. When separated from a food source, they adapt within minutes, find new territory, new prey. They don't. She gestured at the monitor, showing Whistle, still sitting, still waiting. They don't do this. Maybe they do, Bennett said quietly, when they have a reason. Whistle made that sound then, the one from the first night. the chitter that bypassed ears and went straight to understanding. But softer now, sadder, calling for him. "That is not a hunting cry," Dr. Quallen said, and for the first time, her clinical detachment cracked. "That is not aggression or territorial behavior. That is loneliness," Bennett finished, "because Whistle's not a mindless predator. They're a kid who's been alone their entire life until some idiot crashed and gave them half a nutrient bar." Dr. Quallen's mandibles moved rapidly, a sign of agitation in her species. "If this is accurate, if bonding capability exists, we have been studying them wrong, treating them wrong. The entire conservation approach is—" She stopped, turned to face him fully. "This changes everything." "Great," Bennett stood, happy to contribute to science. "Now let me see Whistle before we both lose our minds." Protocol states, "Protocol can wait 30 seconds." Bennett was already moving toward the containment area. "You want to study unprecedented behavior? Watch what happens when we're reunited. Take all the readings you want. But I'm done with this experiment." Dr. Quallen didn't stop him, didn't call security. Just followed, scanner in hand, already recording. Bennett overrode the containment door. Freight haulers learned to bypass locks, came with the territory, and stepped inside. Whistle hit him like a meteor, not attacking. The opposite. The creature practically tackled him, making sounds Bennett had never heard before, a combination of that whistle song and something closer to sobbing if predators could sob. They pressed against him, checking him over with nose and eyes and gentle touches, making absolutely certain he was real and whole and there. "I know," Bennett said, arms wrapping around Whistle's neck, fingers finding that spot behind their ears. "I know. I'm sorry. One night, remember? I promised." Whistle made a sound of pure relief and basically melted against him, all that lethal predator grace dissolving into something that looked suspiciously like a child reuniting with a parent. Behind them, Dr. Quallen was scanning rapidly, her mandibles moving so fast they blurred. Neurochemical spike, oxytocin analog, stress hormones dropping, heart rate normalizing. This is— She paused. "This is a bonding response, genuine attachment, not mimicry, not instinct, actual emotional connection." "Yeah," Bennett said, not looking away from Whistle. "I could have told you that 5 days ago." "But you couldn't have proven it," Dr. Quallen countered, and now her voice held something like wonder. "No one could. We assumed capability absence, not capability suppression. Night fangs can bond. They choose not to because survival in isolation selected against it. But given the right circumstances, the right trigger—" "Food and kindness," Bennett supplied. "Revolutionary concepts, I know." Dr. Quallen made a sound that might have been laughter. Human sarcasm. How refreshing. This discovery will require new research parameters, new conservation strategies, possible reclassification of the species as socially complex rather than solitary. "And Whistle comes with me," Bennett said firmly. "Non-negotiable. We're bonded now, which means separation would be— what did you call it? Harmful to a sentient creature? Pretty sure that's illegal across most jurisdictions." "Legally, you present an interesting case," Dr. Quallen admitted. "If night fangs are capable of bonding, removing a bonded individual from their chosen companion could indeed violate sentient rights legislation. You would need to remain together for observation, documentation of the bonding process, behavioral studies." "So I'm a research subject now?" "You are a participant in groundbreaking xenobiology," Dr. Quallen corrected. "With full compensation, ethical oversight, and the satisfaction of rewriting what we know about one of the galaxy's most misunderstood species. Bennett looked down at Whistle, who looked back with those amber eyes that had watched over him through the darkest nights. "What do you think? Want to be famous?" Whistle made their namesake sound, the rising whistle that sounded like joy, and head-butted him gently. "I'll take that as a yes." 6 months later, Bennett stood in the cargo bay of a station he actually recognized, watching Whistle, now fully grown and approximately the size of a small transport vehicle, carefully navigate around a maintenance crew who'd learned to leave offerings of food and receive gentle head bumps in return. 3 more bonded Nightfang pairs had been documented. Dr. Qualin's research had won awards. Conservation policy was being rewritten, and Bennett had somehow become a consultant for interspecies behavioral dynamics because the universe had a sense of humor. "Ready for another run?" he asked Whistle, who was now authorized, after significant paperwork, to accompany him on cargo hauls. Turned out having an apex predator as a co-pilot was excellent for preventing piracy. Whistle whistled agreement, following him into the new ship, bigger than his hauler, actually maintained, with a proper AI that didn't try to navigate through stars. In the cargo hold, Bennett pulled out their dinner. Real food now, not rations. He took half, gave Whistle half. Same as always. "You know," he said, settling against a crate while Whistle ate, "my ex-wife would have loved this story. Woman divorces man for being emotionally unavailable. Man crashes on alien moon. Adopts death machine. Suddenly very available emotionally. There's irony there." Whistle made a sound that might have been sympathy, might have been amusement, and promptly stole the last bite of Bennett's sandwich. "Hey!" Bennett protested, but he was laughing. "Some things never change, huh?" They launched an hour later, cleared for a standard supply run to the outer veil. As the station shrank behind them and the stars stretched ahead, Bennett leaned back in the pilot's chair. Whistle was curled in the co-pilot's seat, custom modified to handle their weight, head resting where they could watch both the viewport and Bennett. "You know what's funny?" Bennett said to the darkness between stars. "I spent years running solo routes to avoid connection, avoid caring about anything. Thought I was safer alone. Then I crashed, gave half a nutrient bar to a creature that should have killed me, and somehow found exactly what I was running from." Whistle's ear twitched, listening. "The universe is weird," Bennett concluded. "Weird and cold and massive and terrifying. But at least we're not facing it alone anymore." Whistle made that sound, the one from the very first night. Not a chitter of hunger or a whistle of joy, but something in between. A sound that said, "I'm here. You're here. We're enough." And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, hurtling toward their next destination, Bennett finally believed it.